So in this video, I'm going to go over with you the history of Midtown East in Manhattan. Now, Midtown East, I guess you would say, is considered a corporate neighborhood today at least, but wasn't always that way. And what made this neighborhood change drastically over the years? So if we go all the way back to the 1800s, if you were able to see Midtown East in the 1800s, it was not the Midtown East that it is today. So there was a lot of transportation that was going through this neighborhood because it's right in the center of Manhattan. But there were actually trains that had to watch for cows crossing in the neighborhood. It was very rural. And look, if you look back in history, at some point, all of Manhattan was rural pretty much at one point or another. But to think that in the 1800s that this was happening is actually crazy when you think of also when the development of other neighborhoods in Manhattan started to happen as well. So things in Midtown East didn't actually start to change until the year of 1902. And why is that? So in 1902, one of the biggest train crashes in history happened on Park Avenue. Now, up until this time, Park Avenue wasn't what Park Avenue is today by any means. Now, Park Avenue today is known as a very luxurious avenue in Manhattan that people pride themselves to live on. So back then, in Midtown East, before this time period, there was so much pollution, smoke going on from the train traffic going on in this neighborhood that the apartments on Park Avenue were kind of known as bare bones, nothing special, apartments that people didn't really desire to live on at all, which is wild to think about because if you know New York City real estate, that is so far from the truth nowadays. But back then, it was kind of seen as an area that people didn't really desire to be in, and it definitely wasn't Park Avenue. So it wasn't until that train crash that things really started to change. So the city knew that after that crash, so Grand Central that we know today existed before this Grand Central, but it was a different train station. So trains coming into that train station were the reason for that Park Avenue crash in 1902. Now, after that crash was so bad, the city knew that they had to make some changes to Grand Central Station. Now, that crash happened in 1902, but Grand Central Station wasn't built until 1913, and they started the project in 1903, basically a decade, to create the Grand Central that we know today. And Grand Central Station is a marvel today still. You can only imagine what a marvel it was during the year of 1913 when it opened. Like, completely started to transform this neighborhood. Now, you didn't see a huge transformation in the grand scheme of things in this neighborhood until the 1930s and 40s, and I'll get into that very shortly on why, but this is when things really started to change because now so many more trains were able to start coming in from the suburbs of Connecticut and from the suburbs of New York into the city. And when more people are able to come into the city, more people are able to come into the city for work, and more jobs are created. That's one reason of why that cycle starts to happen. Just one reason, but that's what you really started to see here during this time period. So I just want to take a look somewhere in this video. We're going to put up a picture of Grand Central Station in this time period. Now, take a close look at that. If you know Grand Central Station today, and maybe we'll do a side-by-side comparison because I really want you guys to look how, like, the Grand Central Station that we know today literally is the Grand Central that existed back then. It's kind of crazy that when you are looking at Grand Central, you're looking at such a piece of history in the city. And it's kind of cool that they kept it so intact. So there was a time that the Grand Central Station we know today that we have was actually going to be destroyed. And I will also get into that very shortly. When Grand Central Station opened in 1913, it became the largest train station in the world. As the decades went on and more people were able to come into the city for work, skyscrapers started to pop up in the neighborhood of Midtown East, and a lot of development was going on here. And people actually claim that the business district in Midtown East started to actually rival Wall Street. And Wall Street had already existed for over a century at this point. So that was a very well-developed business district in Manhattan. Now, the Chrysler Building was built in the 1930s, and at the time it was built, it was the tallest building in Manhattan. So the Chrysler Building held that record until the Empire State Building was built, and then the Empire State Building beat it out. So the Chrysler Building was built in 1930. Then Waldorf Astoria was built in 1931, and everybody knows the Waldorf. They had so many well-known guests and well-known people going in and out of this hotel. That's how it really got its reputation to what it is today. Then you had Rockefeller Center that was built in 1930, and this was another huge development that took place kind of in the neighborhood. Now, I know that if you're watching this video, you're like, it's not really Midtown East, it's kind of in between Midtown East and Midtown West, but you can only imagine how much this development still impacted the neighborhood as a whole. So United Nations, another huge development in Midtown East that's still there today, was built in 1952, so that's when you started to see that. So then you had that international travel that was coming to the neighborhood even more so than before. So it wasn't until 1960 that Grand Central was potentially talked about being demolished. And what did they want to replace it with? They wanted to replace it with an office tower. Like, there isn't plenty of other places where you can put office towers. So I don't know if you guys know that the original Penn Station was actually demolished, and I know Penn Station is not part of Midtown East, but basically I bring that up because they wanted to do the same exact thing that they did to the original Penn Station to Grand Central Station. And this fight about getting rid of Grand Central that we know today went on for about a decade. So it did take some time for Midtown East to be what is considered today, but it's kind of crazy to think about how Midtown East is still so much of a newer developed neighborhood than Wall Street is. Because I feel like most people kind of think that all of the renaissance of New York City kind of happened at once, but when you look back at history, there were neighborhoods that were hardly even touched at certain points while others were fully developed. So it's kind of crazy to see what a difference that was and how Wall Street became a commercial hub so much earlier than Midtown East is, because they're both very comparable commercial neighborhoods today. So I have to say, Park Avenue has definitely come a long way. Grand Central Station is still the Grand Central Station that existed in 1913, which is wild. So I hope you guys appreciated learning some of the facts about Midtown East. If you guys have anything to add to this video or have any questions about the history of Midtown East, please share them in the comments, because as always, I love hearing from you guys. So we just launched a City Life newsletter. So we created this newsletter to really help people live better lives in New York City. So we're going to be going over everything from fun facts about New York City, where to dine, where to do your grocery shopping, really just content that is going to help you live a better life while you're here. So if that sounds valuable to you, please click on the description of this video and use the link there to sign up. And I'm just going to thank you in advance, because we're very happy for you to become a part of the community.